Before the world called him a legend, before stadiums erupted at the very sight of his stride, there was just a boy from Trelawney, Jamaica, barefoot, unknown, chasing shadows on a dirt track. His name was Usain Bolt, and no one knew he would one day break the sound barrier with his feet. But greatness doesn't knock, it explodes. And in Bolt's case, it detonated at the speed of light. This is not just a story about running fast, it's about defying biology, conquering pressure, and laughing in the face of human limitation. The journey to immortality had already begun, and the clock was ticking. From the beginning, he was different. Towering above his peers even as a teenager, he moved with a strange grace that defied logic. He didn't look like a sprinter, too tall, too loose, too laid back. Coaches whispered doubts behind closed doors. But when the gun went off, he didn't run. He vanished. There was no mistaking it. This boy was born to chase something far beyond medals. At the 2002 World Junior Championships, a 15-year-old Bolt didn't just win gold, he made history, becoming the youngest ever World Junior Champion. And just like that, the boy from the countryside had stepped into destiny's spotlight. But lightning doesn't strike without storms. As his fame rose, so did the weight on his shoulders. Injuries crept in like shadows at dusk, testing his body and will. Critics sharpened their blades, questioning his discipline, his hunger, his heart. Bolt was accused of being lazy, uninterested, too distracted by fame. But what they didn't see was the fire building beneath that relaxed smile. Deep inside, Bolt was crafting a storm. He wasn't just preparing to race, he was preparing to redefine time itself. And when that moment came, the world would either witness something divine or see him fall flat in front of millions. The 2008 Beijing Olympics arrived like prophecy, a grand stage, a billion eyes, and one man with a mission to silence doubt forever. In the 100 meters, he didn't just win, he shattered reality. Bolt coasted to the finish line in 9.69 seconds, looking sideways, arms open, celebrating before the line. Untouched, unbothered, unstoppable. It was arrogance to some, brilliance to others, but no one could deny they had just witnessed a once-in-a-millennium athlete. 3 days later, he did it again in the 200 meters, this time destroying Michael Johnson's revered world record. Bolt had flipped the world of athletics upside down in under a week. What made Bolt terrifying wasn't just his speed, it was the way he made it look effortless. He danced at the blocks, smiled before the gun, and turned pressure into performance art. Rivals tensed up, Bolt loosened up. While others gritted their teeth, he winked at cameras. It was psychological warfare wrapped in charisma. And yet behind that joy, there was an assassin's focus. Every training session, every stride, every heartbeat, he was pushing his own limits. The showman was also the architect. He didn't just want to win races. He wanted to carve his name into the very soul of time. By the time the 2009 World Championships arrived, people had run out of superlatives. But Bolt hadn't run out of miracles. In Berlin, he obliterated his own 100-meter record, crossing the line in 9.58 seconds, an alien number. Analysts were speechless. Sprinters trained for decades just to run 9.90. Bolt had casually dipped below 9.60. Scientists broke down his biomechanics. Physicists studied his stride. It was as if nature had gifted him a code no one else could crack. Bolt wasn't just ahead of his time, he was rewriting it, stretching what was humanly possible, one explosion at a time. And yet, through all the records and gold medals, Bolt never lost his humanity. He laughed with children, he joked with reporters, he gave credit to his teammates, his coach, his parents. He knew that his rise wasn't a solo flight. It was powered by those who believed in him when he was just a tall kid with untied shoelaces. Fame didn't change him, it magnified him. And in doing so, Bolt became something rarer than a legend. He became beloved. Even his fiercest rivals admitted it. There was no hate in their hearts. You couldn't hate lightning, you could only watch in awe. But in the shadows of his glory, a silent clock was ticking. The wear and tear on his towering frame, the endless tours, the media, the expectations, they were all chiseling away. Sprinting is unforgiving. One slip, one false start, one injury, and a decade of dominance can vanish like smoke. Bolt knew the end was coming. The world, however, wasn't ready to let go. Everyone wanted more miracles, more magic, more moments. But greatness knows when to leave. And the man who outran time itself was starting to feel its weight. Still, he wasn't done. Not yet. The 2012 London Olympics were his moment of reaffirmation. The doubters had returned. Was he still the fastest? Was his era over? The gun fired and Bolt answered with thunder. He won both the 100 meters and 200 meters again, becoming the first man in history to defend both titles. And he did it not by chance, but by pure dominance. There was no stumble, no luck, no fluke. Just a master at the height of his craft, reminding the world that lightning may strike once, but legends strike again and again. With every race, Bolt wasn't just beating opponents. He was beating time itself. But all legends face their twilight. The 2016 Rio Olympics were different. He was older, wiser, a bit slower, but still unmatched. He completed the triple-triple, 3 golds in 3 consecutive Olympics. It was the final chapter in a book written in flames. But fate had one last twist. A teammate's doping violation would later strip them of 1 relay gold. Bolt, always a team-first warrior, was heartbroken. 1 medal gone, but the legacy intact. Because medals tarnish, records break, but moments, those unforgettable flashes of awe and electricity. Even after 3 Olympics and an avalanche of gold, Bolt's story wasn't finished. He had become something more than an athlete. He was now a living myth. Children didn't just run anymore. They did the Bolt pose. Nations beyond Jamaica adopted him as their own. His name became synonymous with the impossible. But behind the scenes, his body was paying the price. Every race took more from him. The back problems, the hamstring scares, the constant tightrope between power and pain, it all added up. But Bolt never let the world see the cracks. He smiled through it. That was his code. In 2017, the world gathered for one final curtain call. The World Championships in London, the same city where he had lit up the Olympics 5 years earlier, became the ground zero of his goodbye. Fans filled the stadium not to watch a race, but to witness history breathe one last time. And as he stepped onto the track for his final 100 meters, the roar was deafening. No man had ever walked into retirement with such reverence. But this wasn't a fairy tale ending. Bolt finished third. The crown passed. And for the first time in nearly a decade, he wasn't the fastest man alive. Many called it a sad ending, but Bolt saw it differently. He had nothing left to prove, nothing left to chase. He had already conquered everything. He had already given the world miracles. The loss didn't define him, it completed him. Because true greatness isn't about perfection. It's about rising, falling, and walking away with your head high. And that's exactly what Bolt did, with grace, with honor, and with that iconic smile that had charmed millions. He wasn't just a sprinter. He was a symphony of speed, charisma, and courage. And now he was bowing out with the dignity of a king. What made Bolt eternal wasn't the medals or the times, it was the way he made people feel. He turned cold, mechanical races into electric theater. Every time he stepped on the track, it felt like the world paused. Even people who didn't care about athletics tuned in. Because Bolt wasn't just racing others, he was racing fear, doubt, pain, pressure, and beating them all. He gave people hope. He made them believe in magic again. And in a world that often feels divided, Bolt reminded us what unity looked like. Nations cheering in unison, borders erased by the sound of his name. Even his rivals couldn't escape the aura. Tyson Gay, Johan Blake, Justin Gatlin, all fast, all fierce, all left in Bolt's slipstream. They trained for years, optimized every detail, studied every frame. But Bolt had something science couldn't explain, a gift that defied physics. His stride length, reaction time, force output, it all added up to a blueprint no one could replicate. And yet he never rubbed it in. He celebrated with them, hugged them, uplifted them. He was dominance without arrogance, swagger without spite. That's why even in defeat, he stood taller than everyone else. because it was never just about winning. Off the track, Bolt's legend only grew. He became a global ambassador, a brand, a symbol of excellence. He appeared on talk shows and commercials, on billboards from Tokyo to Toronto. But fame never poisoned him. He stayed grounded, rooted in his Jamaican culture, his family, his origins. He gave back constantly, donating to schools, building communities, mentoring young athletes. He never forgot where he came from. And that loyalty made him untouchable. The world loved Bolt not just because he ran fast, but because he never ran from who he was. He carried his roots like a crown. In a desperate attempt to fill the void, Bolt even flirted with professional football. He trained with clubs, took the pitch, tried to channel his athletic genius into a new form. But it was short-lived, because truthfully, there was no replacing what he had already done. Football had stars, track had Bolt. And while he could entertain the idea of switching sports, nothing would ever rival that feeling of the blocks, the gun, the silence before eruption. He was born for that stage. Everything else was a shadow, and Bolt knew per hour, made headlines, but it was his acceleration, his ability to maintain speed over 60 meters that truly baffled experts. Coaches analyzed him frame by frame, trying to reverse engineer the impossible. But Bolt wasn't a formula. He was a phenomenon, a once-in-a-lifetime glitch in the matrix. He didn't follow the book, he rewrote it. And the deeper they studied, the more they realized, there may never be another. As the years pass, new names will rise, records will fall, the sport will evolve, but some shadows are too vast to escape. Bolt cast one of those shadows. Every young sprinter lines up against his ghost. Every victory is measured against his legend. Because when you set the gold standard, everything that follows feels like bronze. And yet, Bolt would be the first to cheer them on. He never saw himself as the gatekeeper, but as the lighthouse, a signal that greatness is possible, that speed has no ceiling, that dreams, no matter how wild, are worth the chase. And perhaps that's his greatest gift. Not the records, not the fame, but the legacy of belief. The idea that a boy from a tiny village can conquer the world with a smile, a pair of spikes, and the courage to chase lightning. He didn't just inspire sprinters, he inspired dreamers. He reminded us that joy and greatness aren't opposites, they're soulmates. They run your own race. Because once in a while, someone comes along who doesn't just win races, they stop time. Years after his final sprint, the echoes of Bolt's footsteps still ripple through the sport. The track, once just a strip of rubber, now feels sacred where his spikes touch down. Fans revisit his races not just to witness speed, but to relive the feeling of awe, of exhilaration, of being alive. There's a reason his 9.58-second world record feels like an eternal number, one etched not in statistics but in spirit. Every time the clock ticks near it, the stadium holds its breath. But Bolt's real power wasn't in how fast he ran. It was in how deeply he moved people. What separated Bolt from the ordinary was his duality. He was thunder and laughter, pressure and play, discipline and rebellion. He danced on the track, yet trained like a soldier off it. He made the grind look graceful. His coach Glenn Mills once said that Bolt's biggest strength wasn't his legs, it was his mind. When others cracked under weight, Bolt rose. He saw competition not as war, but as celebration. And that mindset disarmed his rivals before the gun even fired. He turned the most intense moments into theater, the greatest stages into playgrounds. That mental edge made him invincible. Even in a world obsessed with stats and science, Bolt brought back something ancient. Myth. Like Hercules or Achilles, he existed just slightly above the realm of men. And in doing so, he reminded the world of the beauty of physical poetry. Every stride he took was a line of verse. Every finish line was an exclamation mark. He turned sport into story. When the kids of tomorrow ask who Bolt was, they won't talk about medals first. They'll talk about the feeling, the goosebumps, the disbelief, the joy. That more than any gold is the weight of true legacy. The silence after his retirement was deafening. Track meets lost their fire. New champions emerged, but none had that same gravitational pull. Cameras still rolled, but they didn't tremble with anticipation. Because Bolt didn't just run races, he gave meaning to them. He made people care. He stitched moments into memory. And without him, the sport felt like it had lost its heartbeat. It's rare for an athlete to become the soul of an entire discipline. But Bolt wasn't just part of track and field. He was track and field. His departure left a void no stopwatch could measure. For Jamaica, he became more than a national treasure. He was a revolution. In a land that had already birthed legends, Bolt elevated the island onto an even higher pedestal. Tourists came not just for beaches, but to stand where he grew up. Schools were renamed, statues were built. But more than anything, dreams multiplied. Young boys and girls saw a new kind of hero, one who looked like them, laughed like them, lived where they lived. Bolt made success tangible. And for a country that had often been overlooked on the global stage, he proved that greatness could come from anywhere. Despite all the worship, Bolt never sought sainthood. He was flawed. He admitted to moments of laziness, to doubting himself, to struggling with fame's pressure. He wasn't a robot programmed for perfection. He was a man who learned to dance with his demons. That's why his victories felt personal. He didn't just run for medals. He ran for meaning, for identity, for the fire inside him that refused to die. And every time he crossed that line, arms spread like wings. It wasn't just a celebration of speed. It was a rebellion against limits, a declaration that nothing is impossible. As the years pass, Bolt remains a beacon. He appears at events, gives speeches, mentors rising stars. But there's a shift. He's no longer the storm, he's the sky after it. Calm, vast, reflective. And yet in every crowd he enters, people still light up like they're seeing lightning. Because greatness doesn't fade, it transforms. And while he no longer chases gold, he now pursues purpose. He builds businesses, promotes youth athletics, and shares his story, not to boast, but to inspire. Because deep down, Bolt knows his fastest days are behind him. But his most meaningful days may still lie ahead. There are whispers now, young sprinters talking boldly, a few even daring to say they'll break his record. The world watches with cautious excitement, because that's the mark of a true legend, not to be untouchable, but to set the bar so high it demands evolution. Bolt welcomes it. He isn't threatened by the future. He's excited by it. That's the fire of a champion who understands time better than anyone. He knows records are borrowed. What lasts forever is the story. And his, it's still being written by the fans, the dreamers, and the runners chasing his shadow with fire in their lungs. One day someone might run faster. Someone might break 9.58. But no one will beat Bolt. No one will replicate that perfect storm of talent, charisma, timing, and soul. Because Bolt wasn't just a man in motion, he was a moment in history, a reminder that the human body, when fueled by joy and defiance, can defy logic. That greatness doesn't require anger. It can bloom from laughter. He didn't just raise his arms in victory, he lifted a generation's hopes. And long after the tracks are quiet and the lights dim, that feeling will remain. Eternal, electric, undeniably Bolt. But what if the story isn't over? What if the legend still holds one last sprint in the shadows? Not on the track, but in the heart of the next prodigy he inspires. What if somewhere in the hills of Trelawney, a barefoot boy is running wild, chasing butterflies and destiny? And what if the world, unaware, is about to witness lightning strike twice? Because that's the beauty of Bolt's legacy. It doesn't end with him. It multiplies. It echoes. And just when you think it's gone quiet, you feel the ground shake. The wind stirs. The sky darkens. And you know, he's still running.